Some people call me the Space Cowboy. Some call me the Gangster of Love. Some people call me Maurice Wheatwoo because I speak of the pompatus of love. People talk about me, baby. Say I'm doing you wrong, doing you wrong. Well, don't you worry, baby, don't worry. If you call me on the phone, I guarantee you I won't answer. Instead, you'll get this insane message saying, some people call me the Space Cowboy. I've had it on my phone for as long as I've had a phone. My dear old dad used to call me up every morning back in Springfield, Missouri, and if I didn't pick up, he said, "Damn it, Space Cowboy! I got Space Cowboy again! Space Cowboy! Tell my son to call me back!" My mic's working. Okay, now let's see if we can get this bugger to work. What the hell kind of an idea? Well, we'll do it the used to say we'll do it the Polish way. All right. Okay, are we ready to roll, Sam? All right. Well, good evening and welcome to Tales of Winona's Past. I'm Joe Hughes. This gentleman here is Merle Hanson. Thank you all for coming this spectacularly cold evening, and who knows, maybe we'll get maybe a nice inch of greasy snow to wake up to tomorrow. I'm going to be starting out today's show with something that I've dreamed of doing forever and ever and ever, but never could, but now I can, and I don't care if you like it or not. um, I am going to show you around the Morgan Block. Those of you who have been to one or two of my babblings over the years know that I am kind of fixated on the Morgan Block. The Morgan Block, you see here, is an entire, it's a name we use today for original plat Block 16. It is a block, a city block, surrounded by 2nd Street, 3rd Street, Main Street, and Center Street. One of the buildings on this city block was called the Morgan Block. It was the most beautiful business block built in Winona, Minnesota. I'm sorry. When it was knocked down in 1971, the whole city block was named the Morgan Block. And that's what it came to be. But the Morgan Block is actually this. This is Winona when Winona was still spectacular and beautiful. It looks even better if it were a little bit darker. The building with the fancy awnings you see there is the Morgan Block. Next to it is the Richardson Block. Behind that tall one-story building, 3-story building is, well, I'm not going to do it. There's not going to be a test on this. I promise you this is actually going to be more enjoyable than I'm making it sound. This is what the quote-unquote Morgan Block looked like in 1972. It was just a bunch of dirt. I mean, there are people in this room who saw it every day. Tractor pulls, baseball games, carnivals, where once stood a beautiful complex of buildings, some of which really needed to go. Can't, I'll show you. But anyway, I'll stop and let the pictures talk. We'll take a look down 2nd Street first. And here we are in 1880. We're looking east. What you see there is the intersection of 2nd Street, and it's intersecting with Center Street. To your left are all those old latch buildings that got knocked down. To your right is part of original plat Block 16. the so-called Morgan Block. Dirt streets, 1880. Couldn't get a really good picture of Second Street because it was always been a business and industrial street. There was never anything fancy about Second Street in Winona, Minnesota. The fancy stuff was on Third Street. Oh, you just. We'll get down to Second Street today. I'm going to get down to Second Street today, and you are going to drop your uppers, buddy. And here's what it looks like today. To the left, we have what used to be the Morgan Block. To the right, we had, frankly, a bunch of crap. I mean, nobody's going to miss it. Wait till you see that. Pardon? Oh, well, in 1880, no. Yeah, Gail, I'm not even going to, I'm just going to shut up and change the topic, in fact. Here you go. This is what Main Street looked like in 1925. You're looking southeast. To your immediate left is the ramp leading up to the High Wagon Bridge. Okay. To your left, branching that way, is Main Street. I'm sorry, is Second Street. Main Street is going off to your right. What you're seeing is the butt end of the Morgan Block. He put up this giant sign on the back of the Morgan Block saying Alan S. Morgan, silver, jewelry, and diamonds. So people, for the benefit of people coming down the High Wagon Bridge, they could find their way to Morgan's Jewelry. And again, it is kind of industrial. Notice that there's a coal and cement thing down there. But the paint is holding up really nice on the side of the building. I'll give them that. 1935. It's starting to look just a little bit seedier. You can still see, they've taken out the median strip, but you can see auto parts signs. The building at left is a tire repair shop. The building at right, which is still there, I believe, parts of it are still there, contains Volkmann's it contains Volkmann's appliances, but right there in the picture, the downstairs is an auto dealership. The upstairs is a glove factory. Because sometimes you feel like making gloves. When this one showed up on my computer screen, my jaw just dropped. I got this one. I made this one off of a newspaper clipping from 1971. Right before the Morgan Block was knocked down in October, a reporter and photographer went around taking pictures. They got 6 or 7 of them. 6 of them looked like junk, but this one popped out looking exactly like this. And you see Paul Venable's Cadillac and Pontiac there. To the right, that 4-windowed building. Does anybody recognize that building? Some of you may have had a pizza in this building. Is that it? Is it Sammy's? Oh, okay, because I was alive back then, but I was like a 10-year-old kid in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I don't know any of this stuff for sure. I could be just lying. But I have had it confirmed, Al Paffrath confirmed for me that is, in fact, the original Sammy's. And I think now that's something everybody in Winona really ought to know, because much as I like Rocco's, when my dog and I arrived here on November 23rd, 2020, I put Nubis outside and I called up for a hot, warm, steaming Sammy's pizza to enjoy in my new Winona home. That's what I call product placement. And this is what it looks like today. The Morgan Block. the beautiful little, the Windhaven Court, which is a very useful building, and that ghastly little pedestrian mall. But I shouldn't talk that way because I have also spoken to people here in Winona who feel very warmly about going to that mall and shopping when they were kids because that's what you had. That's where you went. You should have seen the crappy store that I used to have to hang out when I was a kid, and I loved them. I go back there again in the blink of an eye. 3rd Street, the Cadillac Street. Here we are facing east. And again, the building to the left is the Morgan Block. The last building on the corner is not a part of the Morgan Block. It was not built by Stemwind Morgan. It took me years to find that out, but just look at that, how beautiful it is. Yes, it is. And if you happen to know where that Morgan clock went, there is a lady who lives out in Utah, I think, named Robin Dixon, who would like to talk to you and would probably have some money for you. She is a descendant of the Morgan family, and she wants to know what happened to that clock. I will do that. Here's 3rd Street in 1965. This is a time in which people were already getting on saying the downtown of Winona needs to be destroyed. Nothing wrong with downtown Winona. This is how Sylvester Krishko put it. You could just start a match and, burn everything down to Franklin Street. That was a pretty junky thing to say. But on the other hand, he also had a point. It was looking pretty bad. You can't do good business in a place that looks bad. This didn't look so bad. Check it out. There's Williams Book and Stationery, the Garden Gate, Sebrecht's, all these great stores. And this is what we've got today. What really amazes me is that it took them, 3, 4 years to come up with something to build there. The first project fell through, just boom. And then they had to argue for a while about what was going to go in there. And then this is what we got. Great. Okay. All right. Let's see. Center Street is the last street we're going to visit. We're almost done. Here is Center Street in 1880. So lovely picture. And what I like best about it is that it proves that you could stand at the 3rd Street, look down toward the river, and see the river. I'm not trying to bust on our levee and dike system in this town. It is vastly needed. It is what makes it possible to live this wonderful life in Winona. I'm not going to gripe about that at all. But there is something to be said. It was put to me, my buddy Al was telling me. He said, Winona lost something because when you grew up and you could look down and see the river was a part of your life. It was a part of your life every moment you were downtown. And now it's just a place where you go to ride boats or go fishing, which is great. But it's supposedly less of a river town. Center Street, 1971. As seen, I think, from somewhere in the Choate building, this is the beginning of the pedestrian mall. And this is just a new discovery, is that imagine somebody taking a wrecking ball to that nice big white building over there, Stager Jewelry it was, and all the other things, and just put in a nice big brown field full of dirt for about 4 years. I mean, that darn plaza, the Libby Plaza, opened up on this gigantic dirt bomb. And here's Center Street in 2003. My only takeaway here is, shame. My only takeaway here is Don't you just love blooming grounds? I mean, not only have they kept this building pretty much as good as it's ever been, it's alive. It contains a vibrant business by an entrepreneur named Amy Jo Marks, who started up this place in the old post office and made a success of it. And it looks just as good, almost as good now as it does today. Yeah, Blooming Grounds was white in this picture. They used to paint the bricks, I guess, different colors. And I've checked. Well, I could babble about this. I need to shut up and rest my voice and let Merle harangue you for a while. And so I'll just say this is Main Street, 1988, 1898. On your left-hand side, you will see a building that has one little green window hanging over the door. Do you see it there? It's look straight up for my finger. That's where I'll pick it up next time. Thank you.
Testing, testing. Is that all right? Yeah, I get lost because I start wandering. It's one of the things I do and like to do is I will like to walk through downtown Winona. I like to walk through the alleys, which I did in my youth, and I try and find the dead people, and I think, what was my grandfather doing at that time? Did he walk down these same alleys? And the cousins, and the Civil War vets, and the people who helped build Winona, the folks who sat on bar stools. What were they doing? In what time period were they thinking? Joe's pictures can do that because it makes you realize how magic Winona was. It was dirty, it was grimy downtown, but there was a character that got instilled in us in downtown Winona. You ask anybody, and they tell you you're from downtown Winona, and they're a story waiting to be told and waiting to be let out because we come from a family of storytellers. And this downtown has changed so much. I was out walking the other day, and I ended up here, and I started going through the city directory because you want to know what a town was. You look at its city directory, and then the names and the places we ate, and the places we drank, and the places we met with friends, and the junior high and senior high used to be right back there. And so kids would get done with school, and where would they go? They would go downtown. And that's where all their friends were. And they would stroll up and down 3rd Street and they would look in those windows. Everybody kind of got along. The East Enders would come downtown. The West Enders would come. It was a place Winona met, where Winona gathered. And the Morgan Block was a part of that. You had Charlie's and the Levy Bar, the Main Bar. You had the Eagles Club was originally on the Morgan Block called Verrazano Simpson Block. They were all there. That was the times of our lives. And there were bums hanging in the alleys, the dark alleys, and some of those alleys, when it got really dark, because Winona's a dark town, even today, our forefathers did not believe in spending money on streetlights. Should have been inside sleeping, getting ready to work tomorrow. So I went back to the 1976 city directory, and I opened it up to its front page, and I got going in and seeing how many businesses are still around. And as I paged through, West End Greenhouse, Bob Salover, First Northwestern Bank, Winona Typewriter, St. Teresa's College, Jerry Meyer Equipment Rental, St. Clair's Menswear, Warner Swayze, Credit Bureau Winona, Montgomery Ward, Smith's Winona Furniture, Valley Home and Farm Supply, Expressway Foods, Standard Lumber, UBC, Mike Hussman, the Sterling Motel, Happy Chef, Buck's Camera, Gold's Pharmacy, Weaver and Sons, Ruth's Restaurant, Shorty's Restaurant, Anderson Rubbish. All yeah, all the names from our past sit inside us. They formed who we were. So anytime one of those buildings goes down, you feel it because it may look dumpy, it may look worn out, but at one time, it was where a person's dreams were centered. The business owner would live upstairs and the business would be downstairs, and you darn know well that Papa, who ran the business, or Mama, who ran the business, expected their kids to behave. There was no, because it was their reputation, and they took pride in who they were and what they were and who they were becoming. Well, we got a nasty world out there that's forgotten all about that kind of living that we used to live. So I wrote a story, and I told you all I was going to write a story about the first priest. Well, I'm going to get to that, but first I got to write about a place downtown where Peter's Beer Garden is now. It was a beautiful early summer evening. The sky and the sun were headed down. There was a nice, comfortable breeze coming from the north. Skeeters of southern heat hadn't yet set foot in the town built along the river. The Wing Dam Jammers were playing outside at Peter's Beer Garden. It felt like an intergenerational reunion of old friends, young people, old people, carrying on, listening to music, and chatting as they had their drinks. You feel yesterday in the space between the two brick buildings. Winona speaks forcefully as old men Choate and Bailey stare down from their offices across the street, just beyond the seeing. It's nice walking the streets of an old town. Ain't no old folks in the suburbs, I hear my whisperers say. I'm amongst my people, my memories and my myths as I walk through the dark alleys. Old feelings triggered by old buildings and parking lots, not as empty as they were a few decades ago. Storefronts are filling up, and tourists and former townies drop their dollars discovering what a great little town Winona is. I talk to old folk as I make my way, asking what was here and what was there when the streets were mud and lined with manure. Hope sprang from those dark paths. In a world seemingly falling apart, it seems Winona is coming together. It's becoming a place where people can talk and get along. Folks putting away their swords and seeing what another person is all about. It was a beautiful evening as the dead started talking. So this next piece is about the first priest in Winona in 1856 by the name of Father Michael Pendergast. I was talking to a priest one day, and he asked me, well, how did you ever figure out something like that? Or what did you read? And I said, oh, Joe Hughes is not the only person with an issue or two. So, I found this guy, and then he disappeared, and then I couldn't find him again. And I talked to the diocese, their archivist. I even went up to the bishop's house, and the archivist didn't respond. So it took Joe Hughes to find out for me where Michael Pendergast ended up. And I figured when the Archdiocese of St. Paul didn't want to talk about their old priests, I was going to let that slide. It used to get dark in this alley. Kerosene lights lit the valley. And while you think this valley and streets are dark today, it isn't anything like yesterday. You okay? It's just misplaced fear you got running in you. Buy guns and build walls, but it's just human insecurity showing its face. I came to Winona in 1856. I was the first priest to settle in these parts. The Pope at the time was Pius IX. My name is Father Michael Pendergast. And when I came here, there was no church. I was a hope for a lot of people that a better life was to be had here, now and forever. I didn't much know anything about Pope Pius. A bunch of Italian politicians arguing about things that don't matter as far as I could figure. I was into saving hearts from the ravages and savages of Winona living. Hobnobbing with the holier than thou wasn't what my faith taught me. I tried keeping people from entering the gates of hell. The ways of the old as they try and justify their standing. I was a firm believer of that seeing when living. I was surprised when I stepped on over. I never touched the hot coals surrounding the gates. I didn't fly to any magical cloud, but I rose up to see another way. Winona was fertile ground in this town formed by the Dakota and Civil Wars. I heard the confessions and how people felt responsible for the errant ways of the world. You young folks, Hanson, do nothing but blame others. I'm 66 years old, Father Pendergast. Ain't hardly young. I've been dead longer than you've been living. I'm not alone. I've talked with millions of dead folk over here, and none of us have heard anything but how hell on this side. I figure it's just a figment of folks wanting control, living folk. Hell was never far from my thoughts. You become thoughtful on this side where ignorance gets shed. We didn't fool ourselves because we knew who we were. I wonder about your generation, Hanson. You're preaching an American identity that is foreign to me. America, the land of lost identity. The river has always brought me comfort. I like the darkness of late night. Down here by the river is where I would go to shed the stories of the confessional booth. It's us dead folks' favorite time of the day. You got to walk through the valley of darkness to see. And after a night of listening to that river, you see better. Winona was never for the faint-hearted. People and children dying, whole families dying together. Oh, they prayed that whatever God was sending their way would get them. If I do exactly what your book says, God, will you spare me the fires of hell, they would cry. And my fellow churchmen heard the cries of preying upon the masses as devious men toil at their craft, manipulating the deepest fear that lay within our human psyche. Fear, we preyed on the people and picked their pockets. It became virtuous to turn all over to our glorious God. I love this town, Hanson. Always have. I'm an old man looking at you, wondering how this world you are living in has turned upside down. So I meet some strange souls when I'm out walking around. I first met Father Michael outside the Huff Hotel the night Charlie Beam came to borrow money from Lena Weinberg. That's a little different story. I have one more Prendergast story, and I'm going to Well, I want to. Can you entertain while I get a drink of water?
Yeah.
Use that one.
Okay. A sung mass. Oh my God! You're talking to the kid who the nun. What? Go take a drink. I'll tell jokes until you finish. She really did say to me that maybe baby Jesus would be happier if I didn't sing quite so loud. And that's how I knew I would never make it as a singing priest. I'm dying here, Merle. I'm flopping.
Oh man, I've gone down some really dark alleys in my life, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that. I mean, I ran into a lot of brick walls. I ran into those alleys of Winona. They tell stories. They tell stories. And back in the day, they were lively. Steve's Lounge, and we used to cut there from Four Queens and all that kind of stuff. But Father Michael wasn't done with me, so I'm going to give you a double dose. The first thing, Hanson, you notice is the stillness of life on this side of living. Pitch black and pleasant. Your eyes ain't sore and tired, and your heart is void of all those grudges and slights that you've carried. Death takes care of the knots in your living. I know I got carried away with my sermonizing. It's why I had to leave Winona. I got the ball rolling for the diocese here in town. Then the bigwigs started showing up in their holier than thou ways. They didn't think too much of my attraction to the church wine. I was one with the people. I liked rubbing elbows. I tell you, some of the best confessions I ever had happen while I was sitting on the bar stool. Bishops Cotter in Ireland didn't think much of that. I had a nip now and then, certainly before every Mass. I was human after all and carried no delusion that I was godlike. Looking down from a holy cloud is how those bishops carried themselves. I think those higher ups thought they were God themselves. The priesthood has always been this way, a balancing act. Life changes priests, you know, too, Hanson. The innocence leaves as life talks, and sometimes you realize there are not any good resolutions or solutions. Forgiveness is the way, and the boys calling out for hell ain't interested in forgiving. They'd put you in hell rather than let go of their ego. Some of my brothers do nothing but plant the devil's seeds. I used to drink down here right along the river. The humanity of it all gets lost in the hierarchy of holy. A great majority of my life was spending running uphill against that way. I felt whole in being of the people. Send me your downtrodden, you're out of favor, the real people. I like the guy with dirt under his nails and a slew of kids he couldn't afford. The guy who worked and gave all he had to others. That's a real human. There's an emptiness over here, but you don't feel alone. You can feel your insides calming, and you feel a oneness with the spirit that's nice, and the tides of oppressing are not seen. Everything together, no more disconnected thoughts on the other side. Oh, don't get me wrong. You can't escape from deep thinking. I've heard screams as man's conscious brain comes undone. All the ego in the world can't stand up to the energy that occurs as believing no longer cuts it and death sets in. Shoot, I've been told from the time I was little that hell awaited those who didn't follow, I said. Just a planted seed. You see, Hanson, I was a busy man in my living days. I was the first resident pastor at our parish located at 5th and Walnut, Midtown Foods. We consecrated the land before we built on it, and I personally donated land at 7th and Main, where the cathedral sits. I rode a horse to get around and ventured out to the small outcroppings of people in Wabasha, Houston, and Fillmore counties. I liked that, meeting people. I didn't much like the administration that comes with responsibility. I learned to camp, something they didn't teach me at priesthood school. I found holiness in the crispness of a night sky, the sound of leaves rippling and squirrels rustling. Every noise carried a fear that darkness brings, but I felt alive at the same time. I was changing as a man. These lands that surround us tell a story. They tell a story of our past and the people who lived here prior to our reaching these shores. Before our book with its origins in the Middle East and Rome, there were people who tried to live in harmony with the lands of their ancestors. The campfire brought me to their way of life, a gate to a greater awareness. I became human as I heard the chant of old dead warriors. I left Winona in 1874. That's a lot of baggage to be carrying around in your head.
Well, I'll take this one. I've been carrying. Thank you very much. I, um, as a person of Irish descent who has taken the occasional wee dram in a public place, I completely empathize. That's what I wanted to say. I've had this story in the back of my head for a year and a half. I wrote it yesterday. I literally sat down and started writing it, and I finished it when I got home. That has never happened to me before. Now watch, it's going to suck. But it's not. It's not. It's not. I think you're going to like it. In fact, I think Sam's going to like it too. The name of it is called This Kovalevsky Family. I selected the title because it happened to be the first 3 words of the second paragraph. The Polish word kowal, Kowal, means blacksmith. Along with its variants, Kowalski, Kowalczyk, Kowalik, to name a few, it's the most common Polish surname of all time. Researching a Polish family with Kowal embedded in it somewhere can get tough. Imagine going to a genealogy website to dig up your great-grandparents John and Mary Smith. The Kovalevsky family is famous in Winona because of its connection to the iconic hot fish shop. Henry and Lambert Kovalevsky were proud to be Polish, and they served great food. They were the #1 Kovalevsky clan. Their descendants live among us. Winona had another clan of Kovalevskys that people didn't much talk about. They were quite a big deal on the East End back in the 1890s and 1900s. Their descendants live among us too. You never know when you might run into one. This Kovalevsky family arrived in New York aboard the sailing ship Arcole on July 13, 1861. At this point, it was Simon and Josephine Kovalevsky, 7-year-old Antonia, and 5-year-old Andrew. They either stayed in Canada for a while or they didn't. Still working on that. In 1870, they lived in Pine Creek. Simon Kadaski, a widower, and his children Andrew, Pauline, Katie, and John. Both Andrew and John would grow up to become Winona saloon keepers. John was the proprietor of the East End's absolute sleaziest ass dive at 3rd and High Forest, where a certain seedy ass used car lot stands today. In the 1890s, John Kovalevsky was also a Winona school commissioner and on the building committee of St. Stan's. In his late 20s, he was a big deal. There was no radar in the 1890s because if there were, John's older brother Andrew would be flying right under it. John opened his notorious saloon in 1888 at 3rd and High Forest. Andrew opened his first saloon in 1891 at 2nd and Hamilton. That was about as far west as a Polak could get a liquor license. The first two generations of Winona Poles were very serious about retaining their Polish customs and Polish ways and their beloved St. Stan's parish. The first generation was most insistent. Do not go downtown unless necessary. Buy everything from your fellow Poles. And most of all, don't go downtown. Andrew was doing a good business on 2nd and Hamilton. He was pretty respectable. He was the lieutenant of the Polish Legion Marching Society. In a couple of years, Andrew had a full-time bartender named Adolf Blazek. In 1894, the Winona Poles were having their knockdown, drag-it-out street fight over what to do about St. Stan's. And Adolf Blazek got himself thrown in jail. 250 angry Polacks immediately took off down 4th Street to bust him out, along with another 250 watching to see what happened, and a bunch of Irishmen and Germans also waiting to see what happened. The firemen were lined up across the front of the jail holding their axes. There was a steam pump ready to blow water on them. And Andrew was marching right along with them to haul his buddy out of jail. Cooler heads prevailed. But the East End was a rambunctious place back in the middle 1890s, and the Kovalevsky brothers were knee-deep in it. In 1896, Andrew Kovalevsky applied to take out a tavern license on Main Street. He was going to be the first Polak to set up a saloon downtown. For some reason, the city council voted against giving Andrew a license. And one alderman, John Dietz, who was a German, the Germans and Polacks got along just fine in the 19th century, said, "Hey, this is pretty bogus." And guess what? Andrew got his license. Andrew was running a bar in downtown Winona. And he discovered a little secret sauce, a little side hustle that would improve his profits even more. But first, he needed the right building. Oh, there we go. Down at the corner of 3rd and High Forest, Andrew's brother, John, the guy running the Sleazy Tavern, never had problem renewing his license. I really do think that downtown Winona didn't want a Polish saloon. The Polish meant nothing but trouble to downtown Winona. But to be fair to the first generation of Polish people in Winona, downtown Winona meant nothing but trouble. They were even. Fortunately, the Kovalevsky brothers were good Fourth War Democrats, and Andrew set up business. He was never going to try this side hustle at 550 East 2nd Street. You know why? It wasn't the reason he lived at 552. That's why there weren't any prosties running on the east end, because the saloon keepers all lived right above their taverns. You say, "Honey, you want to block off this room for my little man cave?" The saloon did well. I have no other way to say it. My source in the Kovalevsky family informed me. In 3 words, Andrew ran hookers. That is to say, ladies of the night, courtesans, or as they were classified in the Minnesota State Census, sporting women. You see, 113 Main Street was a long, narrow building stretching almost back to the alley. I told you we'd get back here. It's got the little green window. This building was once a part of the Trier block, Winona's first brick block built around 1860 by somebody named General Trier, a Jewish guy named General Abram Trier. And it survived the fire of 1862. In 1898, it was just a warehouse until Andrew Kovalevsky decided to make it into his tavern. And here's the thing, there is only one way to get upstairs. You had to walk the length of Andrew's saloon. So that you could take a couple drinks up with you or cool your heels waiting, and of course he sublet the top floor to a subcontractor. He didn't actually run the hookers. He just charged the hell out of the lady who actually did run the hookers upstairs. And this lady was an old veteran of Winona whoredom. Her name was Edith Shackle. The same Edith Shackle who led poor young blind Andrew Meyer to his demise by setting up the prospect of a wife with the love of a woman. And then he went and shot himself right in the heart. Two Winona people hustling, two Winona business people hustling to make a buck the Winona way. It was a profitable arrangement. Sometime around 1905, Andrew turned his back on the saloon business. He had spent the first 5 years of his life as a happy Polish farm kid in Poland. And then he was a happy farm kid in Pine Creek. He had enough of the big city, so what he did was he and his wife, Anna, sold the saloon and the property and bought themselves a nice big farm in Wiskoy. Living the life. And that is where Andrew passed away in 1912. John Kovalevsky, the runner of the most awful saloon in all Winona, left the saloon business also right around 1905, and I finally figured out what happened to him. Yes, he did die in Montana, but he was just visiting a daughter. He spent the last 20 or so years of his working life serving as a chauffeur and gardener and factotum for Henry the Younger Lamberton. Not Henry W., Henry F., or Henry G., or whatever. I give up. He passed away in 1947. And if there's any takeaway from this story, it's basically this, that, there is the official history of Winona, in which they were founded by the Bunnell family several times. And, then you had your lumber baron. This is all really great. But it was people like Andrew Kovalevsky, like John Kovalevsky. And let's face it, Edith Shackle, they were all business people hustling to make it go. And guess what? They did make it go. And I refuse to think that they are any less important than the people that you hear about all the time. Here, I'm done. Thank you.
10 more minutes. Anybody got any questions? We got young people back there. Have you been listening to our stories? Are you from Winona? No, so you've never heard these stories before. What, Winona State or St. Mary's? Oh, what years are you? Are you? It is really, it is, when you move away and get to different places, that river, you ask any townie here, that river still draws you. These bluffs still draw you. You only feel home. And you walk through these back alleys, and every college student should do it. Not under the condition I did it. What did you, until I got kicked out. But I went back. I was stubborn. But you should walk through the alleys during the daylight hours and look at the old buildings and think about those buildings 100 years before and what they look like and who might have been living upstairs. I mean, they look like, well, that one's pretty polished up. This one, well, this one, and you see that no, maybe that's a different picture, but there is so much history in Winona, and these buildings affected us. They got to our bones. If you're a Winona person, it never leaves you. It is a welcome to our community. We don't have enough places where young people can talk to old people, and the old people can hear the stories of young folks. There's a lot of there's a lot of broken lives in a lot of successful lives in Winona, but there's a lot of broken lives in Winona. And Joe and I try and show both worlds. You know, but you guys survived. I had already been starting by the time I was a junior in college. I had already been starting on the road to schizophrenia. So that started when I was 18. So the odds of you contracting that, you're probably in the safe zone. That's all I got. That's all I got. Any questions? Yeah.
Just like to say, I went to another state. I worked at Cedar Explorer, which is on the Morgan block.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I lived on a farm, so my mother was bringing me to pick up two of those static elders and six children, that first one to go. And my parents really fell out of school, college, and high school. And my mother went to eighth grade. But my mother was going to pick up two to college. It was college then. And then I went to work at Secret at 1 o'clock. I had to walk from the college to town. That was on 3rd Street. And then she would pick me up at about 5:30. But that's how I earned my way to school. And I never made minimum wage. Minimum wage was about 25 at my time. I never made minimum wage. I made across from the hot fish shop. That's where Kumleski was. Henry Kumleski or Lambert built in his dad. That was a wonderful thing. It's just too bad you can't see that. The hot fish shop was too tough. Wasn't it? I never got to the hot fish.
Oh, look at that! Look at that!
By the time you graduate, I guarantee you, you get any number of people over the age of 40 in this town, and we will start voting and training.